there's an idea for your video project that'll be down the road. Something like that you guys can probably pull off. Does anybody have any questions before we start? All right, clear your phone, shut them off. Let's get this show on the road. So today we're going to be talking about kind of the political marketplace and how government fits into the overall picture. This is one thing. I pulled up a bunch of things, but I forgot I was going to pull up another one. So if we go back to our picture of what does private markets look like. We've got that supply curve and demand curve, and let's see it. I think this one has what I want, I hope. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So, when we talk about private markets, we're mostly talking about the exchange of goods and services between two groups. Might be business and people, it might be people to people, but it's voluntary exchange. Nobody has to do it, nobody's forced into it, is an important component of it. And that's how these exchanges take place. So we have the resource market with land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and then we had firms paying them back in wages, rents, and interest and profits. And then upstairs we had the Walmart markets, the output markets, so goods and services flowing to the people who need them and some money. And so this is known as the circular flow diagram. We'll spend a little bit more time on it later, but I thought it was good to bring it up now as we get into this chapter thinking about the government. So the government has to enter the market system in a sense. If we have a system of capitalism is to say, let's have most stuff in society owned by private people rather than owned by government, right? So as you start to increase government ownership of stuff, then we start to move a little more towards communism, socialism, as the government owns more stuff and we're taking it out of the hands of private individuals. So it's really kind of a spectrum, the whole idea of capitalism to socialism, communism, with how much government influence there is. So either way, government comes in, they have to buy some weapons of mass destruction, they need some resources that they have to pay for, they partake in Robin Hood theory, right? So that is the role, the kind of different functions that they play as they try to establish what society's rules might look like. Okay, so any questions or comments there? All right, since I got this up, let me jump to this one. And so this chapter, we're going to be thinking about the marketplace for politics, which is kind of weird to think about. What is the incentives and what are the trades going on? So remember that we always try to bring stuff back to real life people. There's real life people that work here in the government, and then of course we have the households and businesses. And now what you see here in the political marketplace is that the buyers, the suppliers, and the demanders are a little bit different. So the government, the people of the government are putting together public policy programs, weapons of mass destruction, the level of national defense, education, right? So we have these goods that are being supplied to both businesses and households. And how do those things get paid for? Well, they get paid for with votes and campaign contributions. If we have a democracy over here where the people who get into office through some sort of majority rule process, they're looking to get people to agree with the proposals that they're putting forward, right? So we kind of think about this being more of an exchange, and it helps frame things a little bit differently as we try to understand why the government does what it does or looks the way it does. We, as economists and economic students of the world, we want to explore the incentives. Why are people doing what they're doing? Why are the choices being made? And so incentives matter. Okay, so any questions or comments there? So that kind of tees us up a little bit for this next thing. So the start of your chapter, this is chapter 6. I'm going to do a few PowerPoints here. looks at the size of government. And this is kind of a broad brush. This is the United States back to 1930. The green bar shows the percent of federal spending going on as a fraction of the nation's spending. So one thing that we're going to hit a lot harder in macroeconomics class is that we can find the income of the nation. So we got the spending, and in this case, it kind of can be income or spending, but the income of the United States of America can simply be done by adding up the income of all its people, right? How much income did everybody make? Let's just add it up, right? And what we call that is gross domestic product, GDP. And gross domestic product, gross domestic product is the dollar value of all final goods and services produced within the nation's boundaries over some time period. If it's over some time period, then that is a flow variable, just like we did with the income. Usually it's 1 year. When we hear it expressed on the news, we tend to put it in annual terms. So we're going to get into the details of that right now, but I think it's important as you explore this content that you've got the idea of GDP, and for now it's okay to think of it, okay, if I just take the income of the nation, how much money did the United States make last year, right? That is what GDP is, and it turns out to be equal to how much stuff we made, because that stuff that we made is what made us the income, right? The stuff that we made, the dollar value of all final goods and services, turns out to be equal to adding up everybody's income. All right, does anybody have an idea, maybe some of you, I know a few of you have had macro, what is the income of the United States last year, roughly? Is it 60 billion, 500 million, 500 billion, 20 zillion, 8 quadrillion, 100 trillion, 5 trillion, billions, what the hell's the difference between a billion and a trillion anyway, right? It's only money. Anybody got an idea? Or does anybody know if we measure it in the billions, millions, or trillions? Trillions. It's in the trillions. Good, Mason. So it is in the trillions. And kind of what I want you to have a mental memory of is like around 20 trillion. It's actually a little higher than that, but I think for the average Joe on the street, if you kind of at least have a rough idea that the United States makes about 20 trillion, at least is a number to kind of hang your hat on. Now, we can't really wrap our minds around what $1 trillion is or what it could do for us or whatever, right? So we'll spend more time in macro class doing that, but that is approximately the income. If we added up every person's income in the United States, which now it's the end of the year, how many of you have gotten your tax forms? All right, so you got your tax statement and it said how much money you made. You're one of the 20 trillion, right? So we're taking your money plus everybody else's money. And so let's just kind of, these little squiggly equal sign is approximately, it's kind of in your mind, just do 20 trillion. 20 trillion is the income. All right, so now, over here, what that means is this chart is showing the size of the US government as a fraction, as a percentage of the income for the nation. So the government, the size of what the government's doing in the federal government is 22% of 20 trillion. 10% of 20 trillion is 10% of 20 trillion is? 10% of 20 trillion is? How much? 2 trillion, 10%, because we're in trills. So 20% would be 4 trillion, right? Just to kind of put that in perspective. Now you can think about yourself making $100,000 and the government's got 22% of it. You can do those fractions, but it's kind of good to kind of wrap your brain around the size of government relative to the size of all activity, which then means that about 80%, well, then we got to take the state, this is state and local, so we're up to 36%. So about 64% is you guys deciding what you want to do with your money. Does that make sense? So we're going to talk about economic freedom, of like how much of my paycheck do I get to spend? It's about 64%. So we have politicians deciding on 36% of the nation's income of how that money should be spent. And so part of the thing that we explore in here is it better to shift money more into government? Or is it better to, starting where we are today, is it better to look for ways to shift money out of government hands? Is the government doing a pretty good job? Then maybe we should maintain status quo. But what we're going to do is explore different ways that we can look at how the government's doing and different ways we can try to think about the issues that are faced in our economy in the structure of government. Okay, so any questions there? So what happened around 1930? A quick little history tour here. 1930s, anybody remember? There's kind of a significant economic event that happened around 1930. Jensen? The Great Depression. All right, so the Great Depression kind of changed a lot of things with how the government felt about intervening into things. And so, after that, 1940, mid-1940s, what did we have? World War II, right? And so, those two events especially, you can start to see the progression of government getting bigger. Here, there was a little bit of a drop in the 2000s. We might have just moved, by the way, to, oh, we can have the private sector do this, right? The government isn't doing such a hot job with the provision of this particular good. Why don't we just let a private company do it, right? So once in a while, there's policy changes that could have it pushed back a little bit, and then of course it's jumped, and now we're in COVID range. I hate to see what this thing's gonna look like in 2020 and 2021, but those are the bars. That's kind of the evolution of what's happened, and it was really the shock of the Great Depression and World War II that precipitated larger and larger government intervention. Okay, any questions there? All right, well, what are they spending their money on? So, we talked about Robin Hood spending, is my cute little name for it. What's Robin Hood doing? Take from the rich, give to the poor. Now, my Robin Hood idea is different. It's just taking from somebody and giving to somebody else. So, take from the healthy, give to the unhealthy. We get into medical spending. Medicare and health spending. So 27% of what the government's doing is something related to healthcare. Take from the young, give to the old. Which one's that up here? Social Security, 23%. Take from the young, give to the old. There's not some big stock market fund that your money's being saved up when you guys look at your paycheck and they've taken some money out. They're not squirreling it away in some S&P 500 funds. They are literally taking your dough and giving it to somebody with gray hair. That has always been the system. They haven't hid. It's not like it was a Ponzi scheme like Bernie Madoff that they were saying they weren't doing that, but it was always what's called a generational transfer scheme. And it worked kind of good on paper. Back when it started in the 30s, there was about 33 of you guys that supported the seniors. So 33 people, they're like, oh, well, that works pretty good. Well, we take a little bit from the young and we give to the old, and away we go. But now it's down to almost 2 to 1. 2 of you, 3 of you, 2 to 3 of you supporting one person. And that trend has just continued to go down, which means it's going bust. And so I think the latest prediction I saw was around 2038 that it's going to be bust. And you guys aren't going to get your money that you've been putting in. Now, will the government change something? Probably. They're going to need to. One thing is raise the retirement age. So if you guys are thinking, I'm going to get it at 65, well, they'll keep moving that bar up. And maybe rightfully so, because the life expectancy has gone up as well, right? So if you make it to age 50 or 60, you're likely going to make it into your 80s, is what the statistics show. And that wasn't true, of course, way back in 1940s, 1930s. So some of those variables can move, but it's not looking real good at this point. So then we got 11% in income security. This one's probably a little closer to the take from the rich, give to the poor. So welfare programs of different sorts and money that helps with assistance. Maybe it's home assistance, energy assistance, whatever. So if you add up this, 27 plus 23 is around 50%. 50 plus 11 is 61.8 or whatever, so 62. So our Robinhood stuff makes up currently, and it has for a while, somewhere floating around 60 to 70% of every federal dollar that gets paid in is some form of Robinhood stuff. Okay, and then you see weapons of mass destruction, the military-industrial complex here. Us sending troops over near the Ukraine to try to defuse Russia and Ukraine fighting. So defense spending, 15.1. Jay's volunteered before. He's got the military deal, so that'd be part of that too, right? Some of the things that we do to support the military. And then interest on the debt. You guys heard that we're kind of in debt. We got a decent amount of debt. The debt, by the way, for the first time in history here recently, is equal to our income. So the amount of debt that the United States is in total got up to about the level of our income. And then there's some details in there that we'll get into in macro class that can do. But just mentally, the debt level continues to rise. Why does it continue to rise? What causes us to have to take on more debt in the government sector? What causes that? What does the government do wrong, if you think it's wrong, or we can just think of it as just the way it turned out? What would cause the government to have to do that? Yeah?
Inflation.
What's that?
Inflation.
Inflation. No, not directly, but inflation's going to have an influence on it for sure. Let me get my extra credit pen going. What's your name?
Jackson.
Jackson. Oh, Jackson. Okay, you're on. Good. Welcome back. Oh, if I could find my pen. There it is. Last name, Jackson?
Dom.
All right. All right, so Jackson's on the board. Okay. So Jackson was wrong, by the way. He got an extra credit point. Thank you for participating in our little show today. What causes the government to have to take on debt this year? Jensen?
Imports.
Huh?
Imports.
No. Imports is just going to be simply a function of how much we buy from the rest of the world versus how much they buy from us. And again, this is all a little macro-ish, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We got so much fun stuff to do, but I think most of you are going to be in spring 2 macro with me. We got a lot of good stuff. Justice?
Is it unemployment?
Unemployment, no. Although unemployment could contribute to this in ways that I don't want to get into. But no. Mason?
Is it the pandemic?
Pandemic, no. So I'm glad you brought that up. We've been doing this thing for about, as long as I can remember, 40 years, back to the 80s. The thing that we've been doing wrong that makes the debt get bigger, we've been doing year after year after year after year for about 40 years. There was like one year, maybe close to another, that there was something. Antonio?
Is it 4 and 8?
No.
Is it overspending?
Overspending! Ding, ding, ding. I need a little bit more information, though. It's overspending relative to what?
We're spending more than we're making.
We're spending more than we're making. How does the government, quote unquote, make money?
Collecting taxes.
Collecting taxes. Is that really making money or taking money? think it's taking, actually, yeah. So anyway, that's just a little sleight of words, right? But that's how businesses do it. So every year, the government sets tax rates and collects taxes to pay for the spending. Unfortunately, for 40 years in a row, more or less, they don't collect enough taxes to pay for their spending. So what do? They have to borrow. So they issue what's called government bonds, which is basically a piece of paper that says, I owe you $10 billion, love the president, Biden. It's a piece of paper. It's like an IOU, right? It's like, Justice, you want to buy this? You got $10 billion on you? I kind of fell short on tax revenues this year. You got $10 billion? Great, here you go. You hang on to that. I'll pay you back in 5 years, and we'll give you like, I don't know, 2% interest or something. Is that cool with you? So now she's got a piece of paper that she can trade, by the way. She can get rid of it. She doesn't have to hold it. So there's a market for government debt. And Justice is holding some of that debt right now, right? So then when interest comes due, that's this 8.7%, I have to dip into my wallet and pay who's ever holding that thing. Here's your interest payment. I know it's due in 5 years. I'll be good for it, right? I know it's just been 1 year, but really, things are going good. This COVID thing, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. My money's good. My money's good, right? That is what the debt is. The debt is doing that year after 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 year after. Woo! I don't even know how many I did, but I didn't get up to 40, I don't think, right? So that is what's going on, and that's what this chapter is going to explore, is why can't they pay for the stuff they want to do? Why do we continue to go to the well for that type of thing? All right, so here is the breakdown of the state and local, which is really a lot different than the federal level. So most of your K through 12 education that you're doing, that's coming from state and local taxes. And public welfare and health, so they have some health money that's going in. And then we've got police and fire, transportation, utilities and liquor stores. This isn't quite as true in Kansas, but in other states. Are you guys, anybody from states where the state runs the liquor store? What state are you from, Jackson? Virginia? Okay. Yeah, so a number of states, they have they call it the package store, but basically the state runs it. And so that is kind of the breakdown of where your state and local spending is going to. Okay, any questions there? All right, I got I had this one too. This is the last one that we'll look at up on this screen anyway. So this is the growth of the transfer payments, the Robinhood stuff over time. So this is the rate of growth as it's gotten bigger and bigger over time, and the government figuring out ways that they think the society would be more fair if we do more of this and if we take it away. So that's kind of what we want to explore. Like, is that a good use of funds? Is there ways that could be better? Jay?
I was looking up the U.S. national debt. We're at like 29 trillion right now.
Yeah, so remember, if you have your laptops open, no Googling, no other stuff unless I ask you to. So Jay, you're going to lose a point today.
I got curious about it.
So I get you, but stay off the juice, right? You guys are like addicted to that stuff. Stay off the juice. Where's my extra credit sheet? Oh, that's my government bond now. I gotta remember that. All right, but we'll have plenty of time to get into real numbers. We got a lot of stuff to go through, so I want to make sure we get through it all. All right. So let's take a look at a kind of a short video here. That's one of my favorites here, based on one of my favorite economist stuff. Somebody gives credit for.
You spend your own money on yourself.
Spending
you spend somebody
money.
else's money on yourself. You spend your own money on somebody else, or you spend somebody else's money on somebody else. I learned most of this from Milton Friedman. When you spend your own money on yourself, you tend to be real careful about what you're spending, as well as what you're getting. If it's a big item like a car or a house, you're going to shop around pretty good because it's for you and your family, and you're going to negotiate a good price. Now, when you spend somebody else's money on yourself, like when the boss is paying for the meal and he's not there, You might be more apt to pass on that burger and fries and go for the steak and lobster because you're not as careful about the money as you are about what you're getting. Now, when you spend your own money on somebody else, like when you're buying a present, you tend to set a budget for yourself because it's your money, but you're not quite as careful about what you get, especially if you don't know them terribly well. Now, before we go on to the final quadrant, let's take a quick look at the careful scale. You tend to be high on the careful scale when you're buying things for you and your family because you're an expert on what you and your family want and need. As you move farther away from you and your family in city spending, state spending, national spending, and world spending, you tend to be less careful because it's just hard to know what a family might want or need in another country or state. Of course, it's certainly obvious that we're all more familiar and understand our own countries better than other countries, our own states better than other states, our own cities better than other cities, and certainly we know our own families and ourselves better than we do others. And that's why we spend more carefully when our spending is closer to home. And that brings us to our fourth spending quadrant, spending somebody else's money on somebody else. You tend not to be quite as careful about how much you're spending because it's not your money, and you're not quite as careful about what you're getting. This tends to be the least effective quadrant, and of course, this is government. It seems year after year, politician after politician, Washington proves that they're the least careful in spending money because it's not their money, and they don't know the people, places that the money's being spent on. So it's a good idea to spend that money in more efficient quadrants in the form of things like charitable write-offs, tax cuts, or vouchers for school choice. It's worth asking yourself, what quadrant is the next big government spending plan going to be in, now that you know the four ways we spend money?
Okay. So notice with the 40 years, they showed a picture of Obama, they showed a picture of George Bush. The point is, it doesn't matter if there's a Republican in office or a Democrat in office, the incentives are the same, and we've just seen the same thing growing up to this $20-ish trillion worth of debt because of the lack of incentives to spend money in a careful way, the way we might do with on our own. Okay, let's see. All right, yeah, I think we're gonna kill this thing here. I think I'm gonna try to, I'd like to not kill the camera. So I'm gonna try to do this like this, if it works. There, just because I hate when that thing times out. We'll see how this works. Okay, so let's talk about this political marketplace. We looked at it briefly before. So the political marketplace. So who are the players? So number one, we have voters. Voters are you guys, and you express your demand. You express your demand for public goods. I'm going to be more careful and say publicly funded goods. I didn't really get into that before when we defined it, but public goods are non-rival and non-excludable, but there are some goods that the government provides that aren't true public goods. So they're publicly funded goods. They're funded by government spending, but they're not true public goods as we defined them before with the non-rival and non-excludable. Okay, so publicly funded goods through votes and campaign contributions. Votes and campaign contributions. And what is their objective? They want to maximize their happiness, which we will later call utility. But we've been using this word self-interest, which I have to emphasize is not selfishness, because my self-interest includes the interest of my wife and my son and my other family members and friends and my colleagues here at work. So you can be self-interested and not be selfish. right? So the interest of other people is part of your self-interest. All right, but that's what these people are doing here. So we got the voters trying to do that. And then we've got firms. So number 2, firms, these are businesses. And the firms tend to be the top campaign contributors. Top campaign contributors and lobbyists. We haven't talked about lobbying, but this chapter will. What is lobbying? Anybody got an idea on lobbying? Lobbying your politician is usually, if we put it into context, if that helps you out. You're lobbying your politician. What are you doing? And your corporation. You could give me an example. You could give me an example of a business or industry. What are they doing when they're lobbying their politician?
Is it like when they go in there and they want a certain law or something to be passed, or it's like tax cuts or something, and they'll go in there and talk to them about it?
Excellent, Dawson. So yeah, so they'll let me get you down here, Dawson. I gotta get my other people too. I got Justice. Justice, what's your last name?
Rodriguez.
Rodriguez. Okay. All right, so we'll catch up on that. So yeah, you go to your politician and you are the pharmaceutical industry like Pfizer, and would you be very happy if a cheap alternative to treating COVID was possible, like ivermectin? Do you guys remember that drug way back when? So ivermectin's been around for like, I can't remember, 40 years or something. It's been prescribed by doctors around the world, blah, 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 blah. And now Pfizer wants to make sure that their drug, their COVID vaccine, is kind of front and center. Because if there was a cheap alternative that didn't have a patent, especially a patent of theirs, they could stand to lose billions of dollars, right? And so they're thinking to themselves, well, we're standing to lose $100 billion if this ivermectin even is considered. And so I'm going to spend a couple billion on campaign contributions and lobbying. Let me send some of my smartest, brightest to Washington to go sit with senators and make the rounds to say, hey, you know that. So this is I think the best alternative, right? So they're basically trying to persuade. Lobbying is the act of persuading politicians to have laws changed in their favor. This would probably be the easiest way to put lobbying. So lobbying is spending money to persuade politicians to change laws or keep laws that are currently, like maybe there's a current law change that's going to work against them, and they want to say, no, don't do it, we're really the best at it, right? So to persuade politicians to change laws or keep laws that favor them / their self-interest. It might be something for their employees, their products, their profits, their territory, it's way all over the board of what that could mean. Now, lobbying is not always corporations trying to get the laws changed to their benefit. So I don't want you to read that into what I did here. So spending money to persuade politicians to change laws. Give me the example of an organization that would not be a for-profit corporation that would be doing lobbying. What type of things get lobbied that doesn't necessarily tie to a corporation? Some things that we need to change this in society. Antonio?
Would unions be an example of that?
Possibly, yeah. That'd probably be work because a union's not a corporation. As far as figuring out something that's not a corporation, yeah. So a union is a collection of workers that want some laws changed to their favor. Sure, I could go with that. Coop, is that Coop? No, that's Deontay.
Deontay.
You got that full hoodie on today. I can barely see. All right, what were you thinking, Deontay?
I was gonna say
The NBA. Well, we certainly got for-profit teams, right? And so as a group, the NBA might be doing that. So I think they'd fall closer to the corporation. But how about environmental issues? Greenpeace, right? Maybe it's nonprofit companies that are caring about Native Americans, right? So some sort of interest about Native Americans are being mistreated or something happened down in Oklahoma. And so they're going to go lobby their politician. And when I say spend money, I don't mean necessarily that they're just buying them dinner and stuff, but it costs money to physically go to the state house and sit down and talk with somebody, right? So you're doing some sort of efforts. There's certainly an opportunity cost, if nothing else, of your time to try to persuade the politician to get some sort of change. Rayleigh?
With the wage gap.
The what?
The pay gap.
Pay gap? It depends on who it is. I mean, I was just looking for something that was a non-corporation. So there could be some sort of nonprofit or something that's driving that. So I just wanted to, these guys do a lot of it, probably the most of it. As far as the most dollars spent is the corporations, but it doesn't have to be. This is just a generic word of trying to make a change in public policy in some way, shape, or form. Okay, let's see, where are we at? There we go. So the firms though, so what is the objective of the firm? We're going to do a lot of this here once we get into the start of the next chapter next week. What is the firm trying to maximize? Profit, right? So the firm is trying to maximize profit, which would be maximizing, increasing revenues and decreasing costs, or some combination therein. And so there might be a way to lobby politicians so that it's less costly for them to do their business, or it leads to a larger market share or something on the revenue side. Okay, so then on the other side of the picture here, our third group that we're going to identify is politicians. Politicians, they are I almost hesitate to do this, but the entrepreneurs of the political market. I'll put that in quotes. They are the entrepreneurs of the political markets. You know, what do entrepreneurs do? They innovate, they change, right? They come up with a new product, a new thing, and figure out how to pool resources together to make that thing. Well, if we had to pick out of this group, that's what politicians are. So the politician comes into the space, the political market space, and says, I think we should do this program. I think we should cut taxes here. I think we should increase spending here, but decrease spending here, right? So they're proposing changes. So we can kind of think of them as being entrepreneurs of the market. Now, what is their objective? What is the objective of politicians? Let me go to Zoom. Let's see. Chris, give me a number.
Get elected.
Oh, get elected. Okay, who said that? I didn't miss it.
Me.
Me is who?
Rich.
Rich. Oh, there you go. Okay, so yeah, you're up there. All right. So get elected. Yeah, so they want to get into office. And then once they're in office, somebody other than Rich on Zoom here, Marcus, Sienna, Tyler, Noah, we already heard from Dawson. So get elected is definitely one, but once they're in office, what's their objective? Let's see. Rich, give me a number between, let's go 3 and 7.
6.
6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Noah, go ahead and unmute. Once those politicians are in office, what is their desire? What is their objective? What's their goal?
To make America great again.
Make America great again. I don't know. I'm up for that. They want to make themselves or the people who voted in office great again. So in order to help make it better and great again, can they do that if they lose the next election?
No, they cannot.
No. So my point is it's get elected, but then stay in office once you get elected, right? They want to stay in. So you guys have heard of some career politicians. Your current president, Joe Biden, is an example of that. You guys know how long he's been in Washington, D.C. in various capacities? Ancient amount, right? Like 40 years, I think, or something. So he's been a 40-year run. So he's kind of one of those people we call a career politician, taking on different roles and stuff. But once they're in office, so their objective is to get elected, as Rich said, get elected and stay in office. Get elected and stay in office. All right, and we know that that happens in a democracy through some sort of majority rule process, right? All right. So the last player we're going to look at is the bureaucrat. A bureaucrat is an employee of the government. This is a very important person too to analyze and to have in here. An employee of the government. We call them a government bureaucrat. So they're not a politician because that would be an elected. Here, they're drawing a paycheck, right? They work for the government, draw a paycheck. And what do you think their objective would be as a government employee? What would be their objective? What's anybody's objective once you get into a job? To keep the job and make money, right? Yeah, just to kind of keep the job and make money. So that would certainly not be outside this. So how do they do that? So their objective is to keep the job, which means fight for a big budget. The budget for them is an allocation of spending to their department. So if you're an employee of government and you like your job, are you going to be one to be fighting for reducing government spending? Probably not, right? If I reduce government spending, if I find ways to be better at work and cut my work time in half so that I just figured out a way to not have a job, I don't have much incentive to bring that up to my bosses and maybe the politicians, right? So the incentive's a little different. Now in a private sector job, if you were able to come up with some sort of cost-saving idea, would the boss fire you? No. They would say, oh, gosh, you're really sharp. I need to move you into management, right? You're actually going to get promoted by coming up with some of those ideas, right? So it's a different incentive system here that we just have to be aware of. Not everybody's thinking that way, right? What's that? No, not usually. It's hard to find good people. People come up with good ideas, assuming that you've been a good employee. Otherwise, you're going to find something else within that job if it was part of the job going there. All right, so this then sets the stage for some of the data that we just saw, right? That sets the stage for some of the data we just saw. We've got lobbying efforts by the voters. They're trying to maximize profit. The politicians are trying to stay in office. So having campaign contributions is a good way to get their name out. But then they have to change the laws, perhaps, or at least do something to not tick off my contributors. And so laws start to get changed. They get elected. They stay in office. There's not much incentive over here for the employees of government to look for changes and make it better and make it more cost effective. And so government spending tends to grow and grow and grow, slowly but surely over time, what we saw in that picture. And so it's kind of a predictable result. And so what you're going to see in this chapter is what's called public choice theory. And so a guy by the name of James Buchanan, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, is the one that kind of highlighted this for people. Prior to his work in the 60s, people just thought, oh yeah, the government can do it. Yeah, oh yeah, just let the government fix it, figure it out, and they'll do things. And then we started to see some outcomes that weren't too good, and he started to pick apart the incentives and kind of thought about it as this political marketplace. And he's like, when we elect these people into office, they don't all of a sudden become angels. They're still human beings, right? Human beings that are going to pursue their own self-interest. And their self-interest now looks like getting elected and staying in office. And so they have to kind of play to their voters in the way that they can obtain majority vote. And that might mean saying some stuff that they don't quite mean. Sometimes politicians have been known to lie. I don't know if you've seen that before. Tell people what they want to hear so that they can get elected and or stay in office.
It's programmed.
It all starts to make sense, though, a little bit when we look through this lens, right? A little bit different way to look at it. Okay, so what's so wrong with this voting system? So let's take a look at the vote. Turns out, in fact, I was just having a conversation with President Reg just yesterday about Zimbabwe and some other things, and he brought up democracy, and I'm like, you know what? The problem is people put way too much weight in democracy. Democracy is a necessary but not sufficient condition for society to prosper in terms of how it's governed, because democracy, in terms of majority rule, can be corrupted, corruptible, and then there's some issues that I'm going to show you here as well. All right, so let's start off with the distribution of benefits and cost among these voters. So, distribution of benefits and costs among voters. This turns out to be pretty important. This is, again, James Buchanan had a lot to say about this and some of the stuff he did. So we're going to make a little chart here. So we've got voter, and we have Adams, Chan, Green, Lee, and Diaz. So there's our voters. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. And a politician has a new idea, a new bundle, a plan. So there's some sort of government policy. So government policy change. And that change is always in the government's situation. I should say always, maybe once in a great while it might be different. But it's going to be kind of a one-size-fits-all, right? Here comes the change. Some people are going to like it, some people are not going to like it, right? And that's the whole idea with majority, that the majority kind of wins out. So Adams really benefits from this change to the tune of $20. So this is the benefits of the government policy change. Chan gets $12, pretty good. And then it's 4 for Green and 2 for Lee and Diaz. They each get $2 worth of benefit from the change. All right, so as part of the vote, we have Plan A. We got to be fair and have the tax payment plan. So this is the tax payment. So with Plan A, everybody pays $5. You have to be fair about this. Everybody pays $5. We're just going to evenly spread the tax among the people. Okay, so if this proposal is in front of our community of these 5 people, or these 5 people types, if you want to think of it that way, but let's just say it's these 5 people, is it going to pass majority rule? So the cost to the taxpayer, each taxpayer here is paying $5, is what the tax payment plan is. This is the benefits that they each receive personally if the change takes place. And so now if we say, okay, it's vote, let's go to the voting booths, every vote matters, blah, blah, blah. Is it going to pass? No. So Green, Lee, and Diaz are all upside down on this plan, right? So they'd be paying more than what they're getting. So this would fail 3-2. All right, so then let's say we somehow came up with Plan B. And by the way, the cost of the plan here, if we add all this up, is $25. And if we add up all the benefits, I should have did this at first too. We got 20 plus 12 is 32, 36, $40 worth of benefit, right? So the community benefits $40. So in terms of a cost-benefit analysis, would this be a good move, this policy change? If the benefits outweigh the cost, would that be a good move in aggregate? Yeah, right? So if the benefits outweigh the cost, do it, right? So at the aggregate level here, down here where we add up, this is potentially a good policy move, but a democracy failed to do the right thing. The democratic process failed to provide this policy change because of the way we did the pricing system. So we talked about yesterday, we defined government failure, or the other day, I guess it was Tuesday, government failure and market failure. The government, through this system, is failing to provide. This thing is going to get shot down in the voting booths. So democracy failed an action that actually had better benefits than cost. Does that make sense? All right, so now, what if it was different? So this tax plan over here, let's see, my orange is almost gone. What's that on? Let's do black. All right, so what if we were able to better match the benefits and costs. And so Adams, knowing that they're going to get 20, we somehow are able to assess a tax of $12.50 to Adam, $7.50 to Chan, Green $2.50, and then both of these guys $1.25. So now we've got $12.50 plus $7.50 is $20, $2.50, $1.25. All of these numbers add up to be $25. So tax plan B is enough money to pay for the good as well, right? So the money to pay for the good is the same. Back to the voting booths. How does this one go? It passes unanimously. Everybody's in favor of this change. So Adams is paying the most, but also stands to gain 20, right? So there's still a large net benefit there of $7.50. Here with Chan, a large gain, a gain, a gain, a gain. Now notice that the monetary gains of each person is different, right? So sometimes we brought up the idea of relativism that, oh, well, they're gaining 75 cents and this guy's gaining $7.50 and I'm only gaining 75 cents, right? So that part is still there, but whether it's relevant or not, would these guys like to do it, they're personally still gaining, right? So if, again, they're looking out for their self-interest and they can get over their jealousy and envy of other things, this works for them, right? So we have a tax system here that would pass it unanimously, and now the government would do this policy change. So this would be like government success versus government failure to do the same policy change. So democracy does not ensure us that we're going to get an efficient change. We're not going to get economic efficiency. Here, remember from our definition of economic efficiency, we have an inefficiency currently because there's benefits that are higher than the cost for a given change. That means where we're at today is inefficient. We're not going to get there through doing this system. We would get there if we did it through this system. So, can we design a system where this happens more frequently? That would be the challenge. But we go through this model just to kind of show you that the democracy doesn't always give us the right thing. We sometimes put too much weight into democracy. Democracy is not the collective action solution that a lot of people think it is. Okay, questions or comments on the model? You'll have some homework test problems probably kind of similar to that where you have to pick through and see some differences. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to look at was the distribution of these benefits and costs in a different way. So concentrated benefits and widespread costs. That can cause government to fail as well. Concentrated benefits and widespread costs. So for this one, we're going to do another four square here. And we're going to put the cost of a policy change here. And the cost can either be widespread or concentrated. So this is concentrated with a C, is going to be my notation, and widespread. And then over here is the benefits of the policy change. And the benefits can be widespread or concentrated. Okay, so before we go much further, let's think about this concentrated widespread thing here. So you guys remember back to the steel problem when Trump was in office that I was going to try to get away from COVID. I could probably come up with a COVID example, but I'm kind of sick of COVID. So we'll drift back to COVID maybe later. But let's talk about steel. So then President Trump says China is not playing fair with our steel producers. They are unfairly benefiting their steel producers to the detriment of American steel workers. And so what his idea was we're going to put on a tax on steel, right? We're going to put a tax on steel. Now, when we tax steel, what happens to steel, items that have steel, what happens to steel prices in the United States? They go up, right? So now, economists spent some time like, how much do you think this thing sells for, let's say, $12.95 at Walmart, and it's got some steel in it? How much do you think this goes up by? If it was $12.95, a lot or a little? Is this going to double in price or just go up by maybe 25 cents or a nickel? Well, it turns out it's probably just going to go up by a little because steel is just one component of this, right? It looks awfully steely, but really there's a lot of labor and other costs of doing business that go into making it, right? So steel is a small fraction of it, so that all gets diluted. And let's just hypothetically say that it goes up 20 cents. So my $12.95 is now $13.15. Do I give a damn when I go to Walmart and I want my thing of $12.95 versus $13.15? No, right? Widespread costs. So the policy change has widespread costs. Now, if there's 50 million people who are using this cup, it's 50 million times the 20 cents. We're starting to talk about some benefit. Who's getting that benefit? Who's getting the benefit of the higher price? The company or the company's workers, one or the other, or both, right? But the steel producers are getting the benefits. So the benefits are concentrated with American steel producers, right? The benefits are concentrated with the American steel producers while the costs are widespread over all of the Americans. 20 cents a pop, who cares, right? So that causes, even if the tariff, which it was, by the way, tariffs turn out to be bad, we'll do that more in macro class. If the tariff turns out to be not a good cost-benefit analysis, it still might go through because the benefits are concentrated and the costs are widespread. And so what does the news media portray? The concentrated benefits. Oh, you're saving American workers' jobs, you're helping American companies. And they kind of ignore the fact that it's actually a very costly policy because each individual is impacted in a very small way. All right, any questions or comments there? So that's real important. That actually happens quite a bit in the political realm. So that's what we've got these three boxes for. So let me write out that example before I forget. So example, tariff, which is a tax that we'll learn later, a tariff on steel in the United States, taxes foreigners. And so what happens, the outcome of such a policy is that we have a small increase in steel cup price. So equal to, I'm just going to use my example here, 20 cents. with 50 million consumers. And so this is widespread cost. Small increase in the price of 20 cents, but it's to 50 million consumers. And then we have a big concentrated benefit to American steel producers, which is basically equal to the 50 million times the 20 cents. Which is what? $10 million? So 10 million bucks goes to the steel producers, while it's only 20 cents for everybody. Do you think the steel producers might want to do a little lobbying? To tie this back to our other concept, would the steel producers have some incentive to do a little lobbying for tariffs? Yeah. All right, let me get rid of this one. Okay, so back to our little Foursquare business then. When we had widespread or concentrated cost and widespread benefits, that puts us right here on this square, right? So the costs were widespread and the benefits were concentrated. So this is our example of our steel. And we end up with an inefficient outcome. So bad policy. Why is it bad? Because really the costs are greater than the benefits at the end of the day. So through looking at the lens of incentives of the people, benefits, and costs, we don't get the voters voting the right way. The voters here, we probably won't get to it today, tend up to be like not too concerned about it, right? Because it's like 20 cents for the steel cup. I might not even buy a steel cup this year. All right, so what if the benefits were widespread as well as the costs? Would politicians have an incentive to pursue that policy? Would the government be likely to be more successful with a policy like that? See, if it's equal, if the benefits are widespread and the costs are widespread, now we don't have the issue of somebody not caring. So the voters would probably be voting in the right spot or kind of ignore it. The politicians, it's kind of equal. And so we have a better chance of the government choosing a good policy that's economically efficient. So this is one where a policy change is widespread for both. There are probably less likely to be problems. So better, let's just put better chance for efficiency. And maybe I should just put EE since that's what I've been doing. You guys can write it out if you need to, but better chance for economic efficiency when we have them both widespread. Same is true here, actually. If the costs of a policy change are concentrated with the steel company, or I'm sorry, with the voters of a specific area, and the benefits are there too, if the benefits and costs of the policy change are pretty isolated, we have a better chance for that working as well. So when they match up, it's a lot better. You can imagine maybe something, Pittsburgh has been kind of the steel capital, right? And so imagine that the benefits of the policy change are the steel company, but the cost of the change are actually going to be directed towards the people who live in Pittsburgh, right?
Why they call them the Steelers?
Yes, that is why we call them Steelers. That's right. Yep. So yeah, you're always bringing the football analogy back. That's correct. So yeah, so the concentrated benefits and concentrated cost, that works. That has a chance for government through a democratic process leading to it. Possibly with our group of 5 people that I have erased here, they might be more likely to adopt something of a plan, the cost of the plan being different, right? Because it's within their community, it's within their state or something. So a lot better chance of getting an efficient policy change there. All right, and so the last one here is kind of interesting. What if the benefits are widespread? So everybody's gaining 20 cents rather than costing, just to kind of in your mind. Everybody gains 20 cents, right? 100 million people gain 20 cents. The benefits are widespread, but the cost of the policy is concentrated in one area. One particular sector is going to be very costly for them. Is that policy going to get done? No, because the voters don't really care. It's like, oh, I don't really care about that issue. It barely affects me. It might give me 20 cents, big whoop, right? So when we have benefits that are widespread and costs that are here, we have a chance that this policy won't get done. Policy not done, even if economically efficient. Even if it is economically efficient, the people might not come out to the polls. It's just the politician doesn't even want to bring it up, right? Because the costs are going to be benefited with one group and the media is just going to run with it and make them look bad or something, right? All right, that'll be it for today. We'll wrap up things tomorrow with chapter 6 anyway.
Have a good day.
All right, hold on, you guys. I got to get your attendance. Grab more pens is what I need to do. Rich, what's your last name?
11.
What is it?
11.
Okay, gotcha. And let's see, Augie, what's your last name? I'm not hearing very good. It's getting kind of loud in here. What's your last name again, Augie? Anderson. Okay, yeah, right at the top of the list. That's why I missed it. Okay. And D'Amato, I got you. Tyler. Mateo. Yeah, it'd be helpful if you guys put your last name on there. Let's see, Lang, I'm going to pick you up here. And Augie, I got you down now. Oriana, I got you. And Dawson, I got you. Sienna, got you. And Marcus, what's your last name?
Grace. G-R-I-S-T.
Oh, you got the, okay, gotcha.
All right, I appreciate it.
Okay, no one's already got it. Okay, questions?
I just
Need to sign this? Yes. There we go. Can you erase the board for me?
take that off. Next fall. Right.